Okay, welcome back to Nick Lenz's Doctor Who reviews, episode number 8. Now we're still in which is another Patrick Troughton story. This comes from his third season of the show, and this is technically the third story of season 6 of the entire series. Now this one, I'm not going to show the cover of it just yet, because the cover spoils. Like, if you have never seen this story, this is basically the invasion. Yes, it is a story that has a very interesting start to it. So, basically, after the events of the Mind Robber, that was the previous story for this one. Like, oh, we back in the regular reality now? Yeah, it was kind of a weird story. It's been a while since I watched it, but described as basically a weird story. And I should point out, though, this story, there's actually 2 episodes for this story that are lost. Yes, this is a 8-episode story. Excuse me. And the only episodes lost are 1 and 4. And fun fact about this one. Now, I have talked about a few of these animated restoration episodes for Doctor Who. I've talked before. Power Daleks, the faceless ones. This one was the very first one ever done. Yeah. So, the Doctor, Jamie, and Zoe, you're probably thinking, Zoe. Yeah, she joined in the episode Wheel in Space, which is a story that basically is another story. It's kind of in a way a follow-up to this one. It comes like not long before Invasion. I'd say just a few episodes just prior to Invasion. Yeah, that was, simply put, basically the way it is. And this story is mostly lost, Wheel in Space. Yeah, that was the previous story for that I would talk about. There's a particular monster, a very popular one, basically, who shows up in this one. One thing I have noticed, though, when it comes to the classic Doctor Who stories, it seems as though that for this episodes that were lost, there is some Dalek stories that were lost, and, well, the one I'm talking about here. So, they arrive at regular reality, basically in 1960s, presumably when this story takes place, which is in 1968, from November 2nd to December 21st of 1968. Yes. Yeah, that's why I presume this basically takes place. And this is basically also full up to Web of Fear. Now, I love Web of Fear, and I love this one too. It's my personal favorite stories from Doctor Who. Now, the Doctor, Jamie and Zoe, they arrive in present-day England, where they end up in the middle of like a cow pasture, and they had to basically have the sort of put like a cloak on the TARDIS because it needs special circuits for it. Okay, so they basically go get a lift because, well, they don't have a vehicle, so hitch a ride. And it turns out, now, the guy gave his lift. He's very happy to give him a lift, no problem. But he's acting very suspicious. Yes. The reason is because he's being followed. By who? These strange guys in black. Now you're probably thinking, is this the Nazis following him? Is this basically UK occupied the Nazis? No, it's basically some rich guy who's got a security force. Yeah, that's the simple gist of it. Yep, so the guy is also very petty, and he's also very secretive. So, you had to have a pass in order to leave this place, and of course, they get to the outside zero problem after they show the pass and able to pass through, and then of course they had to get out twice. First, they had to hide from these group of people on motorcycles. Second time was because they found him out, and despite the fact these guys don't have any legal authority to go outside of the actual property, it is show your pass. And he points out, though, to them that you don't have actual authority over us. So, the guy's like, oh, just shoot him. There. Dead. Yeah, and this guy, oddly enough, like the way the animated basically showed us, it seems as if this guy didn't have much of emotion at all. I mean, you can hear his voice. Of course, the actor, I think the actor has passed away. Not really sure. So then they get another lift from another guy who is very happy to pick him up. Who this mysterious guy is? Don't know, because they never really say. He just shows up and they drop off and they go see Professor Travers, the one from Web of Fear. They arrive at his place, which I'm thinking though, like, when in the world did the Doctor find out where Travers lived? Because in the previous story, he technically never found out. Unless, of course, he was communicating with him. Now, here's the thing. Travers was supposed to be in this story. They replaced him with Professor Watkins. There's a couple reasons for this. One, the actor who played him was not available. And two, and this is something that's actually kind of petty on the part of BBC to do, because if they brought back Professor Watkins, because he's a character by a different writer, they had to pay this writer royalties, which BBC probably didn't want to do at that point. So they created Professor Watkins, basically his replacement character, who pretty much acted like... Now, does no Doctor? No. Of course, when they arrive at the place, we see his very beautiful niece, who is taking pictures of herself. She's a model. Awesome photographer. And of course, well... Yeah, taking pictures of herself. And then after multiple times, of course, their shutter gets jammed. Yeah, it's one of those old-fashioned cameras. Yeah, this is of course from 1960s, where it basically you have to like develop pictures. Unlike nowadays, which is digital, back then it was actual film. Of course, this was the 1960s, so of course they would have this stuff. Yeah, film didn't actually go out of style for picture taking until like the early 2000s. Yeah, so you choose a very bad time to do this. Yeah, my dad's asking about garbage, and the thing is, he always picks very bad times to basically take care of this. Mm-hmm. You can come in, Dad, even though I'm recording. Yeah, so pretty much basically they have it where so the Doctor fixes her camera and she basically explains where Professor Travers is. Well, this is a way to write about the story. He's off in the US staying with his daughter. Yep, that's simply the reason for it. I'm like, okay, that's a pretty reasonable explanation. Also, these mysterious guys in suits following them. Do they work for Tobias Vaughn? No, they don't. Yeah, that's the guy who's the paranoid guy. Mm-hmm. He's played by Kevin Stoley, who actually has passed away. He passed away 13 years ago. Wow. Yep, and he has actually, he basically was in, he's been a couple, like, he's been a few Doctor Who stories. Like, the first one he was in Dalek Master Plan. A Story is Mostly Lost. He was also in this one, and Mission Cybermen. Yep, that's the stories he was in. I kind of talk about this guy because I think he also played a lead Cyberman in that story. Yes, okay, I'm spoiling right now. The Cybermen. Yep, the Cybermen. Yeah, very classic image. This actually doesn't happen until like episode... I think it happened like episode 6 of the story, which I'm like, that's interesting. Yep, episode 6. And this story brought about... Okay, so they couldn't bring back Travers, but they brought back Brigadier Alistair Lethbridge Stewart. Hooray! Though he was... in the original story, he was a colonel. This one, he is a brigadier. Basically a brigadier general, basically 1 star. And he, of course, explained, of course, he's brought, of course, Dr. Zoe and Jamie, just Dr. and Jamie brought to him by some people in suits, cloak and dagger. So basically, he explains, of course, this is also the first appearance of Unit, a very prominent organization that is very heavily associated with Doctor Who, starting with the Third Doctor, even though technically this story is their first appearance. Yep, they appear. This is their first story they appear in, and you can kind of say that basically this one was kind of in the way, well, how the best way to put it? Basically, purely a lot of setup, basically stuff we would see in a Third Doctor's era, set in modern day, and of course have a lot of action sequences with the military. That's simple just to it. And once the units brought it, it seems like they give a lot to do. And I do mean a lot. And they basically go to visit Tobias Vaughn at his facility, where they basically just break in. This is, of course, before they're picked up by Unit. And they manage to get into his office. Yes, of course, they're brought to him. And, of course, well, he doesn't like the whole... He basically finds out about the place because Watkins went there, so he went to go see him. And he's brought to Tobias Vaughn. We say he's the managing director of this electronics company, even though he's, from what I can tell, he's the boss. He's the one who runs everything, the whole place. And then we see, in behind a wall, we see a communication device with the mysterious, well, of course they don't reveal this episode 4. Yeah, not until halfway through the story do they reveal, oh yeah, it's the Cybermen, and it's kind of a surprise. I mean, I think that the fault for this particular DVD cover, if you didn't know exactly, like, who the Cybermen are, I mean, if I were the people who designed this cover, I would not put the freaking Cybermen in the damn cover because this is a spoiler. Yeah. I mean, the company, I think BBC, I don't know if it's BBC who did this or some other person. Like, okay, Patrick Troughton, fine. But why the heck would you spoil the Cybermen being the story on the freaking cover? Which, that made no freaking sense at all. So, yeah, and of course, they find where the Cybermen are in the freaking sewers. Yes, the sewers. And of course, they come out. They do this whole thing where they just rip something apart. Yes, so when I can tell, and I watched the previous story when they did this, they actually is previously in the Tomb of the Cybermen, a classic Doctor Who story. That's actually, I think, like the only Cybermen story that's actually intact from this era. Yeah, completely intact. You are thinking, really? Out of all the Cybermen stories, Tomb of the Cybermen is the only one from the classic era actually intact? Yeah, this is the only one. Which we're like, that's interesting. Yeah. Yeah, the classic story Tomb of the Cybermen is by far the only one that's basically held together. While everything else is not there at all. No, not really. Oh, and by the way, this was actually the 4th time that the second Doctor fought the Cybermen. You won't get like a lot of appearances like this again until the 10th Doctor, because a lot of these other ones basically, if I'm like once, maybe twice if they're lucky. A lot of times basically were just minor appearances. Yes. So, then of course we get a lot of espionage here, a lot of spy stuff. And they basically reveal this whole, like, how Vaughn kind of came to power, like, somewhat anyways. Like, also the thing about Vaughn is, like, why the heck would he even want to take over the world? Like, because he wanted control of the electronics industry for some reason. I'm not really sure why. It's by far one of the most strangest things related to the Doctor, a Doctor Who story where a human villain is involved with this story, which, not surprising. Though they reveal later on he is actually a cyborg. Yes, Tobias Vaughn is a cyborg. Where everything about him is cybernetic except his brain. And apparently his skin. Yes. When in the world that he managed to get cybernize himself? No idea, because they don't bother to explain the story. And also, there is a hilarious thing happen here when they go rescue Professor Watkins. And we have where we have the Brigadier preparing a big assault team. And then we see Gregory, Watkins' system, basically like in shambles. Of course, he's a coward. And he apparently explains, oh yeah, this whole attack happened off screen. I have heard the reason for this was because money. That was the reason why. They didn't have money in the budget to shoot this big action sequence. They want to save the big action for later, which, okay, interesting. And of course, they play this whole Cybernetic Invasion. I love the fact that almost every single character get a chance to something. I would say the only character who doesn't do much of anything in the story is Jamie. He doesn't do that much at all. I mean, Zoe does much, which I'm glad the fact they utilize her in the story. Heck, even Watkins' niece gets a chance to do something in a couple of the episodes, but Jamie? Well, he's mostly there just to pal around with the girls. He does get wounded halfway through the story. I think with like episode, I think it was like 6. I think it was. Actually, it was like 7. With episode 7, he gets shot by one of Tobias Bond's goons, and then he's out for the rest of the story. I'm like, really? You take one of the best characters in this whole entire run, and you take him out? Yeah, this I don't really know why. It's by far one of the most strangest things when it comes to Doctor Who. Yes. I mean, the best bits happen here, like, is this scene right here, which actually homages in a New Who episode. Yes, where the Cybermen are walking out of, I believe this is St. John's Church, if I'm not mistaken. Let me take a look at that. Let's see. Okay, so the reason why that Jimmy was writing the story, because he was on a break. I'm trying to find it here where, let's see. I know it's from the current stuff. Let's see. What is the name of that one? Let's see. Oh, it's St. Paul's Cathedral. Yes, that's the name of the actual church. Yep, that's where they basically march out of. It's a really good, intimidating thing. We do see like some mentions of basically the Cybermen basically are all over London. We don't see it very much. We see like a couple scenes here, but that's probably due to the production value. You don't need to show every single freaking street covered with a Cybermen. They would do this in New Who a couple times. So, yeah, and basically, they take out the Cybermen pretty easily. Like, they deal with them. Apparently, it takes, like, we all see that one point, I think it was episode 5, where basically this machine developed, apparently, to induce emotions into the Cybermen because the Cybermen are emotionless. So, they pretty much just, well, how should I put this? Sorry about that. I had to basically adjust the sound here. So, they have this, basically, the story. This whole thing where why the reason why Watkins is here, because he developed a machine that can use emotion into the Cybermen, which are emotionless beings. Yes, that's something they do. So, the first one he does it to, he induces fear. And he goes on wild rampage. The Cybermen are like, what the heck is this? And of course, the wild Cyberman is killed by the unit soldiers. And one is left alive. Yeah, a group of 3 of them. Apparently 3 was a trouble for them. And this one was left alive, even at one point grabbing Jamie by the leg. Though they would take him out no problem. Then later on he gets wounded. And then, of course, well, then they have like various military, basically, like some missiles used against a bunch of Cybertronian ships, which, great to see these things. Now, the ones they show in here are the actual Cybermen ships they would also use in New Who. They're these, like, how to basically describe them? Basically, like giant tubes in space. Excuse me, tubes with a circular stuff. Yeah, this was the Cybertronian. This was the Cybermen ships that they used, even New Who, which is great. The fact that it is. So, you can see him pop up a couple times in the episode. In this whole story, you see him pop up in episode 7, and they also popped up briefly in episode 8. Well, the main control ship, anyways, where it had this bomb on board. Yes, they mentioned this bomb, which apparently would basically eviscerate the entire all life on Earth. Just so Cybermen can appear here. Yep. And I think you run things without people here. Yep. So, oh yeah, and the unit that was in Tobias Vaughn's office, that control unit is actually controlled by Devon himself because the first wave was eliminated by a bunch of missiles by the UK. Just after Cybermen had their control over the world, they were able to free it, no problem. One thing we don't get a chance to see here, we only hear it, is basically there's this captain who was sent to Russia of all places. I'm thinking, Russia? You mean you went to the frickin' communist in order to basically? Well, they mentioned the story that they monitored a lot of military reports, so they mentioned, oh yeah, they actually had a missile. So put a warhead there, and they launched it at the spaceship. The bomb itself, basically the control unit that would have brought the bomb to Earth, is destroyed by unit themselves, then the ship itself is destroyed. And surprisingly, the Doctor does not bring along. Now, we have it where the captain, who basically helped the Russians fire the missile at the spaceship, he is escorting the Doctor, Zoe, and Jamie back to the TARDIS. I should point out, though, in the last few episodes, Zoe decided to basically switch back to her regular black suit from the future. Yeah, for some reason, she had to switch this on for. She just randomly puts it on, despite the fact she was wearing it before. She probably took off the little scarf thing. And also, basically, Watkins' niece took pictures of the Cybermen, which they were not very good, though later on, basically, thanks to take pictures of the actual Cybermen later on after they were defeated. She got a job publication firm. Okay, that's interesting. At least you got a chance to do something. Yep. But this, pure fun. Love it. And I love the fact the Doctor got a chance to get like a communication message from Unit, which looks like a giant pen. I know it's inspired by James Bond, but okay, yeah. But that's just so freaking good. I give this story a 10 out of 10. It's an excellent story. And here's the strange thing about the Cybermen. Like, after this story, they didn't appear again for 6 years. Yeah, they didn't appear again until this story, which I've talked about previously. Yeah. Unlike this story here, Invasion, which is awesome. Love it. Revenge of the Cybermen is definitely interesting at best, but it's not as good as Invasion. Sad to say. Though after that, the next time the Cybermen appear again for 8 years, it's about the Earthshock. I'll probably talk about Earthshock in another episode. Yep. But not much else to say about Invasion. It's an excellent story. It's by far, you can kind of think of it as probably the first Doctor Who story that I've talked about where, like, not only Doctor and his companions, I mean, even the supporting characters who appear in this story get plenty to do. Heck, Tobias has a chief henchman named Packard, who half the time the guy has been a failure, but the thing is, Tobias Vaughan is very patient. They also have this thing where they go to his like other office, and Jamie points out, "Hey, this looks like your office." And he's like, "Oh yeah, I have uniform basically just for using the same set." Yeah. But next one story, can't wait to discuss more stuff related to classic Who. Okay, so that's it for Signal Review. Stay tuned tomorrow for my review for more Doctor Who and probably Comic Corner. Okay, next video. Bye.